sitting up.
All right, and welcome to this week's episode of Genres of People. My name is Nick Weaver. I'm the host and also the founder of Gain Media, formerly Gain Music. So this is a weekly series where we talk to community members who have converged and contributed to the wonderful community of Guelph. And this week we've got the wonderful Lynn Broughton on. So thanks for being on board.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for saying my name right. So many people don't.
How do they say it?
They say Broughton mostly, so I always have to say Broughton like rotten, which is maybe not a good branding.
Well, that's good. Well, thanks for being here. And of course, you're on Tasty Tours currently. And not too long ago, you wrote a wonderful piece for Bin 23, which is one of the restaurants that I work at, or the only restaurant I work at now. And I only recently finally got around to sharing that, but those were some wonderful words that you had said about the restaurant. So thank you for that. That was great.
Oh, my pleasure. I mean, do you know why that came about? It's typically me to say, not know what I'm doing. It's COVID. What's going on? No tours. So I wrote to Guelph Today, to Troy, and Tony Saxon, and I'm like, don't you think I should write an article, like a column called Best Bites, and I go and eat a great thing at a place and talk about the piece of like the food itself and then the people that make it. So not so much a restaurant review, more just like that angle. And it's very me to go, oh, why don't I just do this? And now I'm like, oh no, I've got deadlines and columns to write. And so I feel very appreciative of that opportunity. And it gets like, that was my first one.
Yeah, that
was
Bin
great. 23.
So you've had a couple more since then, or?
No, I have one coming up
Nice.
soon, so I better leave soon and eat something.
Next local shop.
Yeah.
So before we get into talking about Tasty Tours, I want to get to know a little bit about where you come from. And for a lot of my guests, I find it's fascinating kind of the paths they've taken to get to where they are. Now, I always just was of the assumption that you've always been from Guelph, here in Guelph, because you just seem so much a part of the downtown and the whole culture of Guelph. But where is it originally that you came from?
I have been here a long time, but I was born in Winnipeg. We didn't stay there long. I was the youngest of three kids. And so my parents then, they immigrated to Canada and lived initially in Gander and then Winnipeg, which would be a fascinating choice of places to
quite the
come to. Welcome to Canada. It's really cool. So then they moved us to Toronto. And so I spent the bulk of my childhood in Toronto and loved it. 70s, 80s, so I'm aging myself now. In Toronto, I think it was the greatest time to be there. We left for a few years and we lived in Zambia for a little while.
Oh, wow.
My parents had work there, and then I lived a bit in northern England, still when I was a kid. I had a lot of family there from Scotland and Northern England, so that was sort of thrilling because we were really just a family of five in Canada. And then I came back to Canada, went through high school in Toronto, and then came here to school in the 80s to University of Guelph.
Wow, that's quite the travels before even high school, having lived in so many different places.
It was great. I had such a really lovely, rich childhood, and it's absolutely informed, a lot of who I am. I think, a sense of exploration and certainly food. Like tables from all over the world and foods and flavors from all over the world. A real pioneer foodie mom, and she worked with food as well. I worked in restaurants since I was 15. So that's, clearly been a bit of a theme for me too. But yeah, definitely that. And I did come to Guelph in the 80s and was here for about 4 or 5 years, and then left and lived out west for 7 years and then returned.
Wow, so just all over and just back in Guelph, kind of first full circle.
A little bit of Laura too.
Okay, that's cool. That was among the places that my parents were looking at, Laura, before we moved to Palmerston and then to Guelph afterwards.
Right, but, Palmerston.
Yeah, Palmerston, yeah. They still call it Palmerston. So you said you'd moved to Guelph to come to school. What was it? Was there something in particular about the University of Guelph that drew you here? Did you have many other options, or what was it that kind of particularly drew you to Guelph for school?
I'm smiling because, my education, I think, while super valuable and I obviously grew in many ways, what I've ever done is a bit unrelated to my education. So I actually came to Guelph because my sister had been 2 years older than me, had come to Guelph. And I used to come and visit her up here, which was nice of her to let her little sister come, who was still in high school. And so I'd come visit her, and it pretty much was my only choice of places to come. Again, it was assumed, I think some families, certainly privileged families, that should be noted, assumed that we would go to university, especially as first-generation Canadians, too, right? Yeah. One must do that. And so it was just an automatic maneuver out of high school, and I chose Guelph. That was my only choice, and I'm glad I did, because I love it here.
Well, that's great. So what did you end up studying in school then?
Oh, a lot of nothing. And
sounds familiar.
Yeah, I know. That sounds so terrible. Not terribly proud of the student I was. I didn't quite finish. So it would have been, early years of general psychology and sociology and things like that. But when I moved to Victoria, I at one point, and I worked in with the Y, and I worked a lot of community groups and with kids and families. And at one point, I was like, I should finish this degree that I started. I mean, what an expensive endeavor to just let lapse. So I did go back to school then, and that was great because as a mature student, there's that notion of, it's actually a feminist notion of claiming your education instead of just receiving it. Mm-hmm. So I was a much more involved student, and I did better too, and I ended up studying women's studies and English.
Oh, that's great.
And so that's a nice marriage. Women's studies sort of allowed for these random courses in and out, multidisciplinary courses, which suited the animal that I am.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. My older sister, I believe, was actually the last to graduate with a women's studies degree from Guelph.
Right.
They got into that program, so she was pretty proud to be able to be a part of that program.
No
and
doubt.
Everything else like that. So it's interesting that you mentioned that too, because I find that a lot of our guests, they don't really take the typical path to getting their education, because it is always there sort of thing. Orbach said the same thing the other week about how he kind of had this divergence of, I'm either going to take my career seriously and learn along the way,
right,
or I'm going to do it kind of half and not really know which path I want to take. So that's really interesting that you said that as well. It
is interesting, and I sort of feel like, in some ways, despite being a bit of a failed student in context of deadlines and formal education, I feel like I'm a student, and I love learning. And I was a bookseller for a few years here too at the bookshelf, and I love learning. I anticipate when I'm a senior, if it's still the case, I don't know, you're allowed to get a degree for free. So I'm like, I am so going back to school then. And so, I mean, I love it. I love the intellectual pursuits and having that opportunity and space and time to learn stuff. Absolutely.
Well, that's great. That's great to hear. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the community work you've done in the past and also currently. But I wanted to ask, in all the places that you've lived in, have you always been as involved in the community as you are currently in Guelph? It seems like you're very connected to Guelph. Was that something that you've found you've always had in every place you lived in, or is that kind of something that's unique to Guelph that just drove you to be more involved?
I think maybe I'm scanning my brain now for the places I've lived, thinking of how I was and how I lived and worked. Certainly as an adult, in Victoria, I think that might have been really the beginnings of that really great interest in community and the people, mm-hmm. and connecting with people in my neighborhood, which was the little Y that I worked for was a real neighborhood Y. Yeah. And so I sort of ran programs for about 200 children in total, not all at once, and that was like whipped me. And but I loved that. I loved sort of integrating, knowing all these kids, knowing their stories and their family stories. So I think that might have launched me, and that would have been in my young 20s, mid 20s. launched me to really getting that sense of community care and healthy communities and pride in community, really.
Yeah. It's interesting to bring it up because Victoria, I found my little sister had actually lived there for a little while, and I found it was very similar to Guelph in many ways.
Yeah.
It's a very different city, but it was very similar. So it's funny that connection kind of happened with that place.
I did, when I did return here and worked at the bookshelf right away, I did that about five years, there were people that I had known in Guelph, then hung out with out west, and then they came back to Guelph, and so I'd be very confused. I'd be at the till selling books going, did I know you from before I left, or, are you from out west? So there was a real, I don't know, it was like a highway that just went Guelph to Victoria or Vancouver. I know, it was amazing. It was amazing.
So of all the places that you've lived in, do you have any that are, aside from where you're living currently, do you have any that are particularly like more memorable or anything like that for?
Well, I think the childhood travel, in Africa, it's so lucky. And, as a child too, you don't have the burden of making rent or feeding yourself. These things are happening for you. And so your eyes are sort of wide open, right? And so I feel not that any of these things were better than Guelph or better than Victoria, but I feel I remember so much of Africa, and I was so open as a little kid, like a 9-10-year-old. I was old enough to remember. I was young enough to not care about certain things, and so I was really open to all these experiences, and it profoundly impacted me, I think.
That's amazing. And so I know for a little while also you were running some of the socials for Guelph for a little bit. Now, did some of your experiences kind of get you to that point? What I'm saying is, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this properly, but were some of those experiences something that you wanted to kind of bring to Guelph and running kind of showing more of what Guelph has to offer by running the socials, I guess?
That's a totally fair question. So for downtown Guelph specifically, well, I did actually start working. I got hired for Downtown Guelph Business Association in 2005, and it was a part-time event programmer, and it quickly became evident that this was not a part-time job. So I actually worked there for just under 8 years, doing what morphed into tons of different roles. Started with event planning, stuck with event. I still did all the events, but also ended up doing all the marketing and communications. It's an organization that is now, I think, in really good stead, and it happened to be a bit chaotic when I was there. Lots of different executive directors and lack of clarity, and a typical nonprofit. So you're working 80, 100 hours a week, and I felt a little burnt out so I left. And when I left, though, I pitched that I would continue doing the Twitter account since I had set it up. So that's my long way of telling you that while I was there from 2005, as soon as socials opened up, what's that, 2007 or something?
Yeah, so it's still a fairly new thing.
Yeah, it was so I got Downtown Guelph onto Facebook, onto Twitter, not so much Instagram. I don't think I just maybe started one when I left, but I definitely got those accounts going, and I always felt very strongly like I would insinuate myself in all sorts of municipal tourism meetings and stuff, because I really believe that downtown Guelph should be this hub, should be this spot. It's not only a historic core, but it should be the center of Guelph in many ways. And so I thought doing that via tourism sort of made sense.
Yeah. And it's great you did that. I feel it's tough to sort of highlight what a city has to offer when sometimes you can't help but look at, this city has this and this has this, and you're kind of comparing. So it's nice to have that focus fully on Guelph. And
just celebrating. We did have all these shops and things. I have been back from all those travels. I've been back now, it's 25 years that I've been back, and I've always lived in and around downtown and worked within downtown Guelph and various means. And so I've seen lots of shops come and go, and some of that, it's not even just, it's not negative, like it's a natural progression of businesses come and go and restaurants come and go. But what I did see was an awful lot of food, coming in, and we had, certainly Bin 23 is a great example of that 16 years old just the other day. Yes.
Yeah.
So, that would have been around the time that I was just getting here. That I was with Downtown Guelph when Bin was getting here. And Bin 23, and I'd say Atmosphere Cafe, really sort of kick-started some of the change of flavor downtown in terms of food and restaurants. I think before that, we had a lot of, predominantly family restaurants and diners who are wonderful. Do not get me wrong, needed, wonderful, glad they're still here. But I think that was sort of all we had. And now we have this like rich amount of places that are so diverse from each other and range from, cheaper eats to high end to healthy, like everything in between.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess we're kind of getting about it into a roundabout way, but
food.
Food, yeah. So I do want to talk about Tasty Tours. So you've mentioned all of these different things that you've done.
Right.
Ultimately, do you feel that sort of led you to create what is Tasty Tours now?
I think absolutely. Like it's interesting, and I tell a lot of I call them tour eaters, people that come with me on tours. I tell they want to know, why are you doing this thing, this business?
Crazy walking around.
And I'm like, it's really a marriage of sort of all the things I've done and experiences I've had to date. And but how it started, do you want me to launch into that?
Yeah, go for it. Of course.
How it started was my friend Stacy, my dear friend Stacy. I had left downtown Guelph in terms of that full-time job, and I was sort of from my kitchen table doing the socials and doing some consulting, social media consulting, and probably a bit wayward, right? And my friend Stacy, who actually ran tourism for the city of Guelph, she was at a conference, and there was a man there who was talking about that he offers courses in doing food tours, and they're viable second careers. So that ages me too. And she's like, she would blew up my phone, like going, Liddy, this is totally you. Everything about this is you. So the next thing you know, and this, I can't believe I cobbled together enough money to do this. We went together to Chicago and took this course. And so I am a food tour professional, and it was fantastic. What a brilliant city Chicago is. On all levels, and it's got some great food. And I learned some nuts and bolts about how to run a food tour, because there are some things that you do have to consider. Hopefully they're sort of hidden in the background, when you're touring someone around to restaurants in a town. But there's things to consider, like geography and architecture and stories, and where are they going to, have something to drink, and where are we going to stop for this? And so always knowing I'd have to sort of augment it for Guelph, for a smaller town. Then I felt like, okay, I'm ready to do this. I'll come back and start this. Yeah. And so I came back and basically went immediately to all the friends I had in downtown that I had made, because I worked for the business association, and I had put on food events too, one called Dig in Downtown, and I went straight, first of all, to those people. And I was like, come and do this with me. Yeah. Come on, it's going to be good for all of us. And so, I'm very grateful to the first people that said yes to that, and launched Tasty Tours 5 years ago, almost exactly, in an untraditional tour season of, almost winter, but felt I was ready, had the name, had the nuts and bolts ready, as I said, a website, and so it just started. right away.
Well, that's great. It's a great way to get people involved and also excited
Yes.
about not only the local businesses but food in general, and that there's more than just your cookie cutter restaurants or whatever else like that out there. So
Absolutely.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so I also wanted to comment. I made the mistake, I think, on the poster, but I called it detours.
Oh,
And
no,
as
it
in-
is
as in
detours. It is detours, but
not detour.
not detours. So that's a branding mistake I made. So when I started, this is something to learn. Don't be too clever with your branding, because always wanted to call it Taste Detours. Stacy helped me with all of this at the beginning, and always liked the idea of Taste Detours. But we thought, let's make the D small. You saw a different evolution of that. The DE small, and then the word, the part of the word detours with a capital T. From that point on, everyone has said detours, which I'm like, it doesn't even make sense. but it's always been detours, and I just finally got it rebranded. I mean, a while ago now, got it rebranded so that people can now see that it's just that word. It's not a special French word.
Taste detour, it's not detour.
Exactly.
Well, that's great. So you've struck me as somebody who's always been able to kind of make things happen behind the scenes and all that from what I've known you. So do you feel that this has kind of been something that you've naturally always had, or do you think from your experiences and your education through life that it's something that you've kind of more developed or kind of led into, I guess?
Right. Well, first of all, right back at you, Mr. behind the scenes of everything, and I have a lot of gratitude for all the things that you do in this town. I don't know. I think it just sort of comes naturally, and maybe I didn't always have it, but certainly came naturally along with that sort of investment in community and things that are important to me about where I live. It's probably entirely selfish on some levels. Like make a place the place you want to be in, or contribute to a place that you want to be in. And to me, I'm happiest when I'm walking down the street and I can wave at like 9 out of 10 people in shops, and that sense of community. So I don't know if that care, that's a personal desire to have within a community, sort of define the way of doing things in the background. I don't know if I was ever so background.
Always out in the front, just leading the way. Yeah, I mean it's hard. There's so many different roles that you can play when you're doing all these things, right? So it's just great because you can really see that people engage and are really into when you're around and giving the tours that they're happy and smiling and really hanging on to the things that you're saying. So it's really great.
I think, and even I've toured now almost like 1,800 people in 5 years, and they're coming from everywhere, but also locals, also Guelphites, and the locals. It's interesting. I'm so pleased that they would come, because I get to show them something maybe they haven't seen before, tell them a little story, a little hidden story they hadn't known before, or even get a taste of something that they haven't had in a place they've maybe been before. So there's always value in that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the stories, that was something else I wanted to ask you about too, is the stories and the history that you include, because I think it gives something people a little more to grab onto and kind of connect with. So it's really fascinating you do that. What sort of inspired you to kind of include all the little stories and try and find more stories about businesses too?
Well, Chicago school told me I should include
taking the lessons learned.
history, architecture, and culture in a well-rounded tour. And it's true, because you're taking people to different places to eat. This is essentially what it is. You're taking people to different places to eat, and it surrounds the idea of food. But those places to eat and those people that make that food are within a geographic region, and it has all those stories, and the people have all those stories. The buildings maybe have those stories. Certainly in downtown Guelph, we're the historic core, so it's just full of that kind of thing. Guelph was founded, the town named Guelph. I mean, people lived here before, of course, our Attawandagan peoples, but the town named Guelph was sort of built on the idea of food, right? And so yeah, telling those stories and tying things together. We have deep, rich agricultural roots, and tying those things together with growers and makers and buildings, because certainly we're going and tasting something at one place, but as we go to the next, I'm going to tell a story or point something out, that's striking maybe on the route that we do. I certainly also always point out, like, Sweet Violet, that's a great flower shop. I'm not going to not talk about a place because it doesn't offer me food.
Yeah, it's still a great local shop.
All of it.
Yeah.
Celebrate the local and the people.
Yeah. You could almost write a whole book of just some of the downtown Guelph history or little things like that. Like
I'm going to do that.
it's something we kind of touched on a little bit. So in these stories and everything, do you find sometimes that there are a lot of connections between not only the businesses but the people running them, and how do you decide who's on a tour?
Right. Well, I mean, I guess the connections are that, and what I care about is that, these are independent, it's not chains, right? So hardworking, and in an industry that I've sort of been in and out of a lot of my life too. So I really admire that. And they're independent. They care about food sourcing. They care about their story too. And so those are the people that I want to connect with. I want to connect with the people that have a pride of place. They chose to come to downtown Guelph too. I would say it's not entirely based on that this is a money-making spot. Like, they really want to be within a community too. And I always say this on my tours, the restaurants, if say Bin 23 were full, one night, they wouldn't hesitate to say, "Well, go see Nikki down a few, shops down there. She's going to feed you really well too." So everybody's really supportive of each other, and it's that sense of community, that sense of camaraderie that I want within my partner businesses, I call them.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely something that, I know every city has that sort of feel within their own communities, but I find that with Guelph, it's something that's very, almost extra special. There is a lot of that. Yeah, definitely.
I think there's a real care, and I think that really, it just comes out. I think it's clearly come out during this crazy COVID time. A lot of people trying to support each other, a lot of collaborations cropping up, and those collaborations, I don't think, COVID or not, I think they'd be happening, I certainly, when I was with Downtown Guelph, I remember in my early days thinking, we need to brand the streets, or market the streets, I think Cardinal Wilson does a good job of being, that a certain geographic spot with those kinds of shops. I call it Eat Street. And, but, Upper Wyndham's having a bit of a hard time, could we, direct some marketing at them and give them some love? I don't know, because we're this tiny 4 not square blocks of a downtown, and yet we have very distinct sort of neighborhood.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure. I find living downtown, you definitely notice that a lot of, if you're on this end of downtown, you don't always go down to that end of downtown, and it's not that far.
Kind of, just over the river, mere blocks away, and sometimes I'm like, gotta go to City Hall, the whole other end.
That extra 5 minutes is killer. You got to be sometimes, though. It's acceptable. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Do you have any plans? I know things are a little bit crazy right now, but do you have plans to kind of expand the tour a little bit, or add other locations at all down the road, or?
I always, since the beginning, have had those plans. So what suddenly, it's 5 years later, I'm still on my own. I've had some ups and downs. And up was that in 2018, Bell 5 TV asked me to do a little TV show, a 6-episode TV show, and I'm like, sure, because I say sure to things. And so I hosted and produced, never done either of those things. And I thought that was really a great opportunity, and I assumed it was going to be a bit of a launching point for Tasty Tours to get more exposure, therefore more customers. In fact, it sort of kicked the business in because I had to cancel a lot of tours in the prime tour season, and I never really recovered after that in that way. So I always have plans. I just can't do it all on my own. So I would love, and then I can't quite figure out how to afford employees, and yet I need to just make that leap. So I have lots of plans for a tour in the ward, 1 or 2 tours in the ward.
There's lots going on there, yeah.
Yeah, I've got geography down for that. I'd love the notion of collaborating with people because maybe that's the only way it's going to happen, and get bike tours going, bike food tours going. Something connected with the canoes on the river.
That'd be really cool, yeah.
All of it. And I am trying to expand into, just before COVID hit, I was looking at making relationships with a lot of farmers within the county. Because I did launch in Elora last year, I sort of broadened that notion of the county and not just specifically Guelph. And so I like the idea of agri-tours and making those connections between growers and makers. And so having a tour that I called Town and Terroir. So,
that's really cool, yeah.
See where it's grown and
yeah.
come and eat it sort of thing on its way to circularity.
Yeah, that's really cool. So for anyone watching, reach out to Lynn if you're interested in helping out or being a part of it and coordinate that.
I've got all the infrastructure in place.
So with Tasty Tours, you've been doing it for about 5 years, you said. Do you have any particular favorite ones, or the ones that stick out at all, or is it too hard to? Yeah, is it too hard to pick out a tour that's a favorite?
Oh, there's so many. Seriously, like so many, and I just love it. Like I love hanging out with strangers and eating with strangers and being sort of proud of this place. But I would say I once had a woman come from Israel. And she was the only person that bought a ticket that day. So this is where maybe I'm not the best businesswoman. I did that for her. And she came from Israel. Now, she didn't come from Israel for my tour, but I told everyone.
Specifically, yeah.
And she was just the loveliest person, and I felt like I had 2.5 hours of getting to know this person. I had a 90-year-old man and his family on a tour many years ago in one of the stops we go to on one of my few Guelph tours, my original tour to the core, which I'm now only doing for the time being.
Right, I was going to ask about those too, about the different tours.
Yeah. Sort of just on hold for now. But to the core, we go to Caribbean Cuisine on Cork Street, and the lovely Lorenza makes us doubles. And he was a 90-year-old man, so like culturally, probably, he was like a white man who culturally was in a different headspace. Certainly probably didn't grow up with doubles. And he was very not sure about them. And then he had a bite of one, and he turned bright red, and he said, "You're trying to kill me." and I was like, "What?" And then he gave me a kiss. So he thought it was all it wasn't spicy at all, but he thought it was spicy. But then he liked it in the end.
Embraced it.
Yeah, I've had a bachelorette group from Kitchener come, and there was like 15 young women, and it was one of my first large group tours, and they pulled up in a limo onto Garden Street, and they got out, and they were all wearing berets. It was a Parisian-themed bachelorette, berets and high heels. I'm like quite clear about where you're walking shoes.
How far you're walking.
High heels, little skirts. They were just so much fun and a growing concern, and caused a big fuss everywhere we went. They dragged Eric Baker out of his shop, and on and on and on. I've had pretty much. I don't think I've really even had a tour that wasn't enjoyable somehow.
That's great. That's good to know, because it means that you're doing well with them then as well.
I hope so.
So can you tell us a little bit about, I know you go to Eric the Baker, and you got different kind of types of tours, but you were originally running the Little Bites tour, was it?
To the core.
To the core, and then the next one was the Little Bites tour.
Yeah, that was the next one I launched. And this is in opposition to what I... Should I wait?
Little technical issues. I think the mic died on us there.
Yeah, in Chicago, they're like, just do one tour until it sells out, like this rule of thumb business-wise. And I was like, no, I need another tour, because for me, we go to six stops on to the core tour. I have many more relationships. There are many more places to go and to shine a light on. So I did Little Bites, and that actually involved some businesses that are now defunct. The Cornerstone is not defunct. Ouderkirk and Taylor, or Ouderkirk and Taylor, and what was the place that is now Mai Tai? And he's going to be so mad at me for forgetting. Babblefish Bistro, which had been there 20 years when Rich, was done. Said, I think I've worked long enough in this industry. So I had Little Bites as more of an pre-dinner, an after-work sort of booze forward sort of tour, in contrast to my Saturday lunchtime tour.
Right.
Yeah, and then I launched one called Eat Street. That started in the market. I really wanted us to be at the market because, this is the whole idea of Guelph and rich history. So that's a crazy place to have a tour, It's so very tight and crazy. So I'm just like, follow me. And we spend an hour in the market, and we're trying, cheese, and we're trying dumplings, and we're trying cider, which is very fun in the morning. Now that you're allowed to sell alcohol at markets, and then we come out of there after an hour and hit the streets and hit like 6 more stops. So Eat Street was a tour, it'll come back, was a tour that we just kept moving and moving and moving. So very different than to the core, which is we go to a stop, we might stand around and try this, and then we'll go sit down somewhere. Eat Street, we just kept whipping through people. Yeah, it was amazing.
Well, I think it's important too, though, to have something different, because not everyone's going to like every single type of tour.
Exactly.
So offering variety is obviously great, but it can be hard to take on as far as trying to run them all.
Oh yeah, it's
a lot of coordination.
There's a lot of communication, right? I mean, with customers as well as with the businesses. Your things that are recurring make it easier. So I can send everyone on to the core tour, like, I'll be there at this time, you got to be precise, or I have someone with allergies. So I find the communication is actually a massive part of my job, and especially trying to do customized or private tours for people, which are wonderful and fun, and then I can mix up the places and expand into new territory too.
Right, yeah. And for those who are wanting to do tours, make sure you do let us know about dietary restrictions, because that can be hard to navigate sometimes.
It's really not fun to take a vegetarian, like put a pile of meat in front of them, and not that I do piles of meat, and that's a terrible way to describe. Put something with meat in it in front of them because they didn't tell you they're vegetarian.
Yeah, and we want to be accommodating for everyone, so the more communication, that's definitely
always. And I have this really good infrastructure and ticketing system, so you can't actually get your ticket until you've answered those questions. So yeah, for the most part it works out, but it's all a crapshoot. People being late. When it's a fairly timed thing, it's timed to keep the pieces flowing nicely together. We arrive when expected. It's not a stressful thing. It's only stressful if we're late. Yeah. Right?
The restaurant's running where you are.
Yeah. And so I'm sort of navigating those relationships with the restaurants all the time, as well as the people, my tour eaters. So, it's a nice balance. I love it though. I really do. I think
that's
it's great.
Yeah. So that's a lot of things to juggle, but that's great. Do you remember your first tour at all?
I do.
The very first one?
I do remember it. Well, I did a mock tour with my friend Stacy, who was involved early on. So I invited, Marty of the downtown Guelph, and I invited my sister as the out-of-town representative, and Travis Oak, who's like a food guy, a food writer, Kelly Hughes, who's I think she's a locavore sort of woman, And I can't remember, I can't remember who else. So the mock tour was to see how it worked out and to get feedback. My sister said, "Stop saying the negative things." And I was like, "Well, I have opinions." And so that was, I learned some things. I learned the timing, because it's really got to flow, and to appear to flow seamlessly too, and everybody have fun. Yeah. But then my first actual tour was a family from. It was like just a family of 5 from Alberta. So I was thinking, oh, this is going to go great. I've got people from Alberta coming to Guelph. And they were cattle ranchers. And they were here because their son was in first year, that he enrolled in first year.
Right, yeah.
Proving to me that people do come to Guelph for a variety of reasons. And so the best part was that we're standing in front of Old City Hall, the courthouse now, where I tend to meet people at the beginning on my tours, feed them Eric the Baker. And I was talking about the carvings on the building done by Matthew Bell, a local stone carver, and one of them on the side of the front of the building is a bull. And there's a whole story to that. You'll have to come on a tour. And I said, and the cow on the building represents, farmers that were from farming community. And they went, "That is not a cow, Lynn." And they were cattle ranchers, so they really knew a bull when they saw it. And so that was, I don't know why I thought that was funny. Anyway, that was my first tour, and I was told.
Educated.
Yes, educated, exactly.
So you mentioned as well that you started doing some tours in Elora and the counties. So that was something that's fairly recent. Was that just last summer?
Yeah,
you started those?
Just last summer. I'm saying that in such a depressed way because it was really successful. It was received very well. I was really supported in launching that tour by tourism, by the BIA, by all the businesses down there. I had a lot of support and welcome, and I was able to sort of speak to the connections between Guelph and Elora. Again, I'm not going to go into that.
Save it for the tours.
Save it for the tours. But that it was great. Yes. So Elora launched, and then of course I couldn't do that this summer.
Right.
It's still on hiatus. I am doing some customized tours there with some of the people but putting it straight back on the books on my public tours, I haven't done because a couple of the businesses are not in the same position.
Right. Yeah. Obviously with the conditions.
So yeah, and then just wanting to expand into Wellington County, and again the notion of agri-tours and connections with farmers and things like that is something I'm trying to build right now.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, I know it's interesting because Guelph is a very Guelph and Elora are obviously very different, but they have so many similarities and connections between the towns and everything like that.
They really do. I mean, they're also both really beautiful towns. Why it's defeating, but I mean, I'm just one person of millions that are having the worst time with COVID, right? Was that it was going to be a gangbuster summer for me in Elora, and because it is a tourist town. So it was being received very well, the tour.
Yeah, and it's tough. I feel a lot of the conversations we've had, a lot of people talking about how 2020 was going to be the year and a big year. It was going to
be the greatest year.
And in a way it was. It was really kind of a change. Not the way we expected.
No, it's quite a change. And like a lot of it pretty terrible. But there's some great things that are coming out of it too, I think, actually. When I'm not feeling like stressed about what to do next, I'm seeing that there's a lot of great things born of this, a lot of collaborations that we've spoken about, born of necessity, a lot of people caring maybe about some things that we should have always cared about a little more all along.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you've pivoted as well with the book that you've put out, the recipe book, Little Bites.
Little Bites, Tastes from Isolation. Yeah. I'm calling it my ISO cookbook. So when everything shut down mid-March, I actually even had a tour like the next day that I had to cancel, and it was all very fraught. And I was like, what am I going to do? And everybody's in just this chaotic mindset while we're figuring it all out and we're learning terrible news. So pretty much by the end of March, I was like, and again, this is very me, I'm going to make a cookbook, And so I have never made a cookbook. I've been a bookseller, but I've never built a book. And I certainly don't even have the tools. Like, I don't know how to create an EPUB file or any of that.
I don't even know what that is.
I know. See, I learned what that was because I learned that I didn't know how. And that would be the best format to do a cookbook in. So I don't know what I was thinking. I mean, I know what I was thinking, the motivation, but I don't know what I was thinking about, like, how the product was going to be. But what I was clear about was that I wanted it to be online and free digital downloads for people, because I was just feeling this sense of, what am I just going to, like, is Tasty Tours just going to expire? And then I'm watching my friends in the, my partner businesses and friends in the food industry on all levels just, scramble. And they were in a state that was probably worse than me because they have rent. I don't have a bricks and mortar place. So they have rent that's due, and they've got staff, so there's something to be said for being on your
solo,
own.
Yeah.
But so I just really wanted, I felt that desperation for all of us, and I wanted somehow to keep hospitality, for a general term, top of mind. And so I'm like, this is what it's going to be. We're going to have digital downloads of these pages that I'm going to somehow build, and then it'll be, a cookbook that will be a complete cookbook for a free digital download. And so in my true way, I say I'm going to do these things I've never done. And then a person from RTO4, who is our provincial tourism people, very supportive. They often fund many projects, and this, I guess, struck them as something, especially the very early days of pandemic, as like, this is exactly what we want to support right now. So they said, what do you need help with? And I'm like, someone to build it.
Everything.
Everything. No, I'll talk to the people and I'll get the recipes. And so I found Jenna. Well, she was recommended to me, Jenna Kessler.
Right. Yeah.
Just a beautiful, beautiful illustrator. Also a former organic farmer herself. She really likes botany, and her illustrations are just gorgeous. But just the person too, like her connection to food and all of that was really lovely and fitting. So she and I started connecting, and we immediately got underway, and it became evident that I was just going to talk to the businesses, and not just businesses. Like, there's a nut farmer from Fergus. There's another farmer in there, and there's businesses from Elora. There's my old friend Dora, who used to have her olive oil company, Tithoria,
right, yeah.
in Guelph, but she's now in Rockwood. She's in there. So, and then Guelph and Elora restaurants too. So I was going to get recipes from them. I asked them for very specific sort of information and a bit about themselves, because I wanted it to be in the true flavor of Tasty Tours, that telling the stories of the people and the places through food and drink. And so I asked very many people, and so many really wanted to be a part of it. Some of them couldn't quite get it together. Some I'm pretty much hit over the head. Gus and Graham come to mind. About that, because it's not their thing, and they're also just whipped, and they, they're just overdone, and they didn't have capacity, they didn't have staff, they were just running like mad. But I did manage to get things from 27 different people, and then Jenna illustrated it, so we were able to upload to my website, tastytours.ca. They're still there. They'll always be there. These pairings of recipes every week. So we were trying to get to the end before, instead of waiting to build the whole book. So we were just doing it 2 at a time as we built the book. And then when it was finally done, I think it was July, I actually finally met Jenna. I had never met her. I discovered she lived down the road from me.
Symptom of the pandemic is you
don't know who it is you're working with. It was so wild. We just did everything via email, and I had a lot of questions as we were getting to the end from people lots of response. I probably never had more hits on my website than at that time, so that the act of trying to stay relevant worked. And people were like, well, are you going to print it? And it hadn't actually been my plan. My plan was like, free, everybody, let's just support. Let's just do this and I'll have something to do, while I fret about money. And so I was like, well, how many people would want one? So I sort of did a soft poll on that and took a risk, like used my own money and took a risk to print some with Ampersand. My old friend James, who I used to work with at Ampersand, super helpful. Jenna laid out the pages in print format for us, and I got a bunch printed, and I've now sold over 200 of them.
That's amazing. Which
is so great, and I know that people. Again, this comes back to Guelph, and it's not just Guelph, of course, it's within the county, but that spirit of support and really wanting to help sort of in any way. And I mean, I had people coming to get the book from me or writing to me. You can buy them online still. Saying, we just want to support the business. Some very kindly wanted to support me too. But just that whole, like, people going out to eat on the Wednesdays, purposely trying to do, those who have been able to really actively trying to support things, because they want their community to stay healthy and alive, and they don't want it to crumble. Right?
Yeah, no, and that's great. Like, we definitely, I'd say there was a noticeable sort of increase in attention on the local shops, and everyone involved in that too. It was really great.
I think I really felt that with the cookbook, and also it should be noted that $5 of every book of the physical book, because obviously the digital's free, sold, and this will continue in the future. Goes to the Seed Community Food Project, who does fantastic.
Yeah, they've been doing a lot of great work.
They do so many great things, and no doubt that's some of the reasons why some of those books sold, because people liked the idea of supporting that too, which is fantastic.
Totally. Yeah, I saw you were able to donate a little check to them not too long ago.
Yeah, I wrote them a check for $1,000.
That's amazing.
Which is great for the first 200 books sold. Yeah.
So that is an ongoing part.
Yeah, it will be. I'll be writing them another check. Definitely sales have waned. Like, it was really nicely hopping there in the summer, and that's when the 200 sold. And so little ones here and there. I keep going to the post office and putting one in, and I sent 2 to Austria recently.
Oh, that's great.
And so they're sort of getting legs all over the world. I know, that's really nice,
Oh, that's awesome. Well, if you do want a copy, then go to the website and buy
everything's doable on my website. Everything you ever need to know is on my website. Tasty Tours.
And those books are great too. I find like the simplicity of them is what makes it so great as well, because so many times you think, oh, if I'm making food, I'm gonna need all these ingredients and all this, all this craziness. But really, it's just very, very simple, and I really like that showcases that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're very different, each recipe. Some are very involved. My friend Patty at Laura Mercantile, she's got poulet basquez, and it's got a long list of ingredients. But that's actually spoke more to Patty and what she sent me in terms of instructions and using this precise kind of pepper, and because I didn't, I edited for spelling, but I didn't try and rewrite people's things, their words about themselves or their recipes. I just let them have at it. I sometimes try to say, I don't think I can give you 6 pages, but
as much as I want to.
Yeah, so we may have to cut a wee bit out here, but pretty much they all are. And I've even tried to make some of them myself and do a time lapse of making some of these recipes, which is funny.
That's great. A little behind the scenes videos then.
Yeah.
So I wanted to touch a little bit about the other work that you're doing within the food community as well, because I know you've mentioned it in a couple posts, and it's kind of tied in with the book as well. But it was about the circular food experience, I believe is what it was called. And is that through an organization, or is that sort of a larger initiative that's been started by a bunch of different organizations locally? Right.
So that all stemmed from, and this is a fantastic, again, another learning thing. Your world sort of spins and it gets opened up to different things. I think I've always cared a lot about sustainability on my tours and try and be like low waste, and I obviously care just by virtue of talking about local food and local food sourcing and stuff. But one of the many things I did since March was do a lot of Zoom calls about, industry, how to cope in the tourism industry, what do we do now, or, hospitality groups and organizations. I got put onto some emails and stuff. So I looked and found that there was a grant called Seeding Our Food Future, and it actually was a little piece of the pie from a $10 million, I guess that would be a grant that was given to Guelph, the city of Guelph, in 2018 from the Smart Cities Initiative.
Right.
So Guelph won this. It worked on it for 2 years and pitched this notion of a circular food economy. And this is a point I actually want to get my phone maybe and read it, because I don't want to get the information wrong. But basically the Smart Cities Initiative then had many little projects coming out of it, and continues to, like 10C is a part of things.
Right,
the municipality, City of Guelph, the university is a large part in the tech aspect of things, certainly, and there's just so many. The Seed is a big player in it all, and I'm going to not be able to list them all. I mean, certainly I would just say, please go to foodfuture.ca to find out all the information about all this. But from my angle, I saw there was a grant, and I'm fairly eager to find grants. So this grant was called Seeding Our Food Future, and I, with the help of a company called Provision Coalition, who were assigned to me, and they help food and beverage companies become more sustainable and think in circular modes, and find their purpose and all of that. Mm-hmm. With their help, I submitted an application for this grant, and I was able to get it. And what I proposed to do was I'm going to create 2 new tours that will focus on the circular food economy. So a direct circle of, and I'm hesitating here because I haven't come up with the second one yet, but the first one's underway and it fell in my lap. So
right, and so that's provided from this grant that came about a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so that's what I'm working on. Yes, that little slice of the pie of the Seeding Our Food Future grant with me and 40 other businesses, or around 40 of us all together, and we've been assigned different cohorts, so 20 per group. So I'm meeting all sorts of excellent people on Zoom, and all sorts of different businesses, new businesses that also got a grant, and they are trying different things. These guys are growing Green 365, are trying to install hydroponic. So you and I, Nick, can have kale growing on our wall in our house. There's this lovely company called A Friendlier Company. These 2 young women that are chemical engineering grads who are making reusable to-go containers. And more than that, they have a whole system of tracking these containers. People pay a deposit when they get their food to go. They then return them to the restaurant or wherever a little depot might be, and they get fully washed, and the restaurant doesn't have to care about any of that, and they get used over and over again. So there's just I could go on. There's so many interesting people sort of within this large umbrella of food and beverage.
Yeah, some great initiatives, it sounds like, and something to definitely follow along as these things develop. Because
absolutely,
it's tough. I mean, I know with a lot of restaurants in particular having to shift to this takeout model, it's been really hard because we came so far to getting rid of so many needless, wasteful things.
I know, and we had to go back to it.
We kind of got thrust into it, just because we had to.
For safety, absolutely. For sure. Like nobody's doing anything wrong, That's why I actually really wanted to mention this A Friendlier Company. Not only are they just delightful young women, but they're filling this need, and it's brilliant the way that they're thinking of tackling this. And I think, watch, I'll be knocking on the door of every restaurant with a flyer or emailing something to the businesses to tell them about this. And and it may not be for all the businesses. Not everybody's got that kind of infrastructure in place or pricing model or whatever, but it's fairly simplistic. And I think it's like, these are the kinds of changes that we need to make to make our world more sustainable. Like, our world's burning, not to be too, dramatic about it, but it is burning, and we have to make these changes that are doable.
And there, it just takes jumping in and tackling it, really.
Exactly, and just bending your brain a bit, like to think, oh, well, if we just did this, then, if we don't think in a linear way, which is what this, my Seeding Our Food Future grant certainly is about, as well as the larger Food Future Smart Cities initiative is moving away from thinking in a linear, they say take, make, dispose model that we've done for so long,
right.
and just to look at everything as having a possibility of being useful. So to not even talk about food as food waste, but food that is wasted, because it still has a potential purpose and a use, and if we change all these things, we could, this is going to sound so Pollyanna, but it's so simple, really. We can have less food insecurity. People could have more access to better, healthier food. We can have more independent businesses that are created out of, really amazing initiatives, and we can have collaborations that are built, and just less waste.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, seeing breweries using, expired bread for beer and things like that it's great to see that,
the spent grain. I think all the breweries are doing that now too. But certainly, I think they're even going further now too. Than I think they were probably very proud, and rightly so, of sending their spent grain to a farmer for their cattle or whoever. But now their spent grain can maybe be used in more dynamic ways even as well.
Yeah,
too.
definitely. Well, that's really interesting, and it's definitely very, very much something to look forward to as far as our food development and where we're headed as not only a society but as a community and everything like that. So with that being said, do you see the university kind of playing a strong role here in Guelph? Because I know the agricultural facility that we have here in Guelph has always been kind of on the forefront of dealing with that sort of stuff. Is there any involvement with them at all right now, or is it kind of...
In terms of this project, this initiative that I was talking about, they're very much a player. They were a player in writing this application to get this $10 million Smart Cities initiative. So they were one of the key players with the municipality, with the county, with 10C. Everybody's got a role to play, right? And so they, of course, would be, their emphasis would really be on like the tech side of things, of course. Not only, though, I mean, there's certainly the Lang Business School that would be supporting projects, and the hotel and tourism food school. So sorry, I've said that wrong. And lots of different facets of the university, but certainly a reliance on that tech aspect that can be brought into the idea of like changing systems within food growing, food distribution, like everything, food data about food insecurity. So there's just so much that I think the university absolutely plays a role. I love seeing that too, because I felt always that downtown and the university was that hill that up there was a real divide somehow.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I like seeing that there's this potential for a deeper relationship somehow, in a collaborative relationship.
Yeah. And it is really great. It's something I've noticed over the last few years. I mean, I was a student here for a little while as well. I never graduated. But it was something that, it was just fine. I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
And although my grandfather might not be, but it's something that I found, I loved the city and everything that was going on with it. But there was always a little bit of a weird, maybe not weird divide, but a divide between what was happening in the city and the university. But over the last, I'd say, 5-6 years, it's definitely changed a whole lot.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that there's more of an understanding that, And I would hope this happens in any university town. I mean, I think having a university in this town is one of the reasons it's such a rich wealth of people, really.
Definitely, yeah.
There's people that come to school, and stay and are a part of creating their community, you know. But I think any university in any town needs to not be solely an ivory tower unto itself, and see itself positioned within where they are, you know, their geography,
totally.
and embrace that and see value. Certainly I've been trying to tell them that in terms of tasty tours, and like, send me your conference goers, you know, I can show people where they are when they come to visit for whatever reasons they're coming to the university.
So people can see what the city's about right away. That
was a plug for that.
Small little plug. Well, it's been great talking with you about all this. I find so often with entertainment and tourism and food, I find it's something that maybe we don't necessarily take advantage of, but it's something that's kind of there, and we use it to preoccupy ourselves with a little bit. But I've been finding in this chat too, just talking about how the pivot has been so important in educating people as well.
And like celebrating too, you know, I mean, it's such a downer, everything right now. And that's a really mild way to talk about a pandemic. It's more than a downer, but it is that, you know, and it's hard to, amidst, you know, some hopelessness and some real, like, it's just a bad time for a lot of people, and people are losing their livelihoods and things like that. So we have to, you know, prop each other up. We have to find the light, the shining light in certain things, and celebrate. And man, I sound like Pollyanna totally, but I think it's those simple truths, right?
It's just, definitely. So amidst all of this, where do you see sort of the Guelph food industry going from here, kind of moving forward?
I cannot be a spokesperson for the Guelph food industry. I think you'd be a better spokesperson for that. I don't know. I mean, if we're looking in this tiny microcosm of downtown Guelph, which is not our entire food wealth, by the way. I mean, we have a lot of great food that's surrounding downtown. But if I were just to look at downtown, I think it'll just continue to evolve and grow, and people will come and set up businesses. Some I hope to connect with, you know, with my many employees to create new tours. They'll set up and they'll see it as a really thriving, healthy food place to be. I think, and I've been saying this for a long time now, at least a decade, that I think one of the greatest strengths of our downtown is our food, you know, and it's so broad and diverse and tasty.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we look forward to everything that you're working on.
Thanks.
And thanks for coming out. And I'd definitely like to, you know, coordinate something for some sort of food festival or something like that.
I would love to. That just ask me and I'll say yes.
Yeah, because it was great having you. I think I forgot what year it was, but we did a little tour with Gain Fest one year to try and tie in a little different element.
I know, it was really nice of you. And did it even really really work very well? I don't know.
Think everything,
but
I always like every little element that helps to make it a little more diverse, right?
It does. And, you know, and so that notion of strange bedfellows, like working together too, right? Can do the greatest things together, the greatest collaborations. And we need each other.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much again.
Thanks, Nick.
And of course, anyone interested, check out Tasty Tours. Thank you again, Lynn Broughton, for coming out and chatting with us today.
Thank you, Nick Weaver.
Right. Thanks so much. And stay tuned next week. We'll be back with another episode of Genres of People.